Landscape photography is one of those genres of photography that almost everyone shoots. It is the default. You see pretty vista, you take photos. Sometimes it really is as unga bunga as that. But the more you get into landscape photography, the more that you realize that actually it isn't just about taking pretty pictures of nature. And there's actually a certain amount of things we can do and concepts that we can master as photographers to really elevate our shots high above the average snapshot of a tourist. Unlocks, if you will. Hey, I'm Pat K, and if you don't know me already, I'm a travel photographer and Sony digital imaging ambassador based in Tokyo, Japan. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you 4 unlocks that really helped shape the way that I approach thinking about landscape photography differently. This video is a part of my Beginner's Guide series, a series where I teach creative skills for the new content creator, but really it's for anyone who is interested in learning and listening to the things that I've realized along my own journey in the pursuit of trying to make images that stand out and images that stand the test of time. We'll be going through a lot today, but if you want to skip all of this and you want to learn all there is to know about the creative skill of photography from end to end, then check out my Photography Fundamentals course, which I will leave a link to in the description. Okay, the 4 things we're going to be talking about today are redefining the idea of landscapes, planning, moving into specific techniques, and then finishing off with movement. Now, let's talk about the first one. How might we redefine landscapes? That's a question to you watching this video right now. What is a landscape to you? Chances are, and I'll throw up some example images here, when you think of landscape photography or landscapes in general, you think about big, wide open vistas, amazing nature and colors and mountains and rock formations and all of that good stuff, and you would be right. But, and this might ruffle some feathers here, I think that's kind of boring. At least to me it is anyway. And don't get me wrong, I love taking photos of, pretty natural scenes in front of me just as much as the other guy that I'm shoulder to shoulder taking photos of the same scene with. But throughout my career, I've always strived to think about not just what's in front of me, but also how I can bend the idea of what a landscape is in order to make images that are different and more interesting to look at. To me, this starts from the idea of what a landscape is itself. Conceptually, I think of them as scapes. Landscapes, yes, but also cityscapes, cloudscapes, seascapes, snowscapes, nightscapes, whatever has a large open vista in any season at any time, they're all the same to me. This reframing is super useful to me because conceptually, I'm not bound by traditional rules of, the best lighting is at sunrise and sunset, or always having 3 layers, foreground, middle ground, background in all of my shots, or even having to lug a tripod around all of the time, and we will get into that later on in the video. And while I'm thinking outside the box, when I approach any kind of open vista, rather than thinking, what is the best landscape images I can get here, I'm just thinking, how can I make the best possible image here, period. That, in turn, has been super successful for me to be able to open up when it comes to experimentation and trial and error. So many of my favorite landscape images are ones where if you were to put them in a gallery alongside other landscape photographers, you'd probably say that they were a little bit quirky. They're images of clouds and shadows, and they use people's houses as subjects, and they're so incredibly minimal that all they feature is just a tiny little blip of a person so small you would miss it if you weren't paying attention. I know that for many of them, I almost missed a shot because I wasn't paying attention. But the point here is to reframe your mind to not think about landscapes in the traditional sense. Sure, there's a time and a place when you're at a lovely mountain or a waterfall or something. Sure, take that image. But also Take the time to shoot the cloud formation in the sky, or the lines of a river, or the shadows during the last moments of a sunset. Open yourself up to more opportunities to press the shutter button, and you'll grow faster and further because you've tried harder and been more creative. The second idea is really about landscapes in general. Landscapes are all about getting outdoors and shooting something in the real world, the elements, in the thick of it. And a big unlock for me was realizing that just shooting nature. Therefore, plan around that nature, or get good at understanding that nature. My girlfriend calls me a cloud whisperer because every day when we're out and about, a few hours before sunset, I'll look up at the sky and say, hey, today's sunset's going to be an absolute banger. It'll have lots of color and it'll be great. Or I'll say, nah, today's sunset is going to fizzle, so I'm not even going to bother. It's not going to look good or whatever. Most of the time, I'm usually right, but sometimes I'm also delightfully proven wrong. But over the years, I've learned how to read the clouds. I know the difference in the elevation of different clouds and what they're called. I've seen the dew point for that day. I've noticed that it's been raining and it's just cleared up. I see the wind picking up at a certain height. And I know which direction the sun is going to set. And I know that it sets in different areas at different times of year. And this is what it's going to look like. And all of these things, all of these little things are things that you pick up about nature in the context of landscape photography over the course of your career. And the more of these little things you can pick up about nature, the more that you can start to understand how the nature will look around you and how you can plan around that ahead of time so that you can then go and capture it. Landscape photography is about nature, and planning for that nature or that nature event to happen literally is the battle. Eventually, when you get experienced enough, so long as you've planned things well, most of the time, the planning, driving to the place, the pre-production of the shoot is actually so much longer than the actual job of pressing the shutter button itself. I can't tell you how many times I've meticulously planned a shoot, looked up what time of year is the best time to go, what right day, what right hour, and then pre-planned where the sun is going to be and imagined my composition ahead of time and scattered out the location weeks in advance and then convinced some of my friends to come along with me and then arrived at a location ready to shoot. I take the shot, I'm done in 2 minutes, and that's it. The planning is so important to the success of your shoot. So nowadays, I put way more effort into that so that I know that it's going to turn out well every single time. Let me know in the comments below if you want a video about the things that I do to plan a landscape photography shoot. And I think it'd be a pretty interesting one. So let me know. So landscape photography is extremely approachable. It's very forgiving of settings for 90% of the shots that most people want to take. You can rock up to a place, pull out your phone, auto settings, wide lens, bam, job done. Most of the time, even if you're rocking a dedicated camera, that's probably along the lines of what's going to happen. But there are specific occasions and specific circumstances where you might need extra techniques and gear to be able to achieve certain looks that you might find desirable. Most of the time, in a landscape photography context, these techniques are going to revolve around a tripod. And most of the time, it's going to involve some kind of longer shutter than your hands can hold. Now, just as a quick primer, the techniques are based on the style of scapes that you are shooting. As a very rough list, if you are doing, say, astrophotography, you're going to want to learn what's called the 500 rule. You're going to want to learn it, and then you're going to realize that it's completely wrong, and then you're going to modify it to your own liking. If you're doing landscape photography that has anything to do with water, you're going to want to learn how to do slow shutter shots with a tripod and ND filter so that you can blur the water to create a nice silky effect. And then you're going to throw that all out the window for the last point that I will talk about in this video very soon. If you are doing any kind of landscape shot where you're deliberately learning the fundamentals of creating depth through having foreground, middle ground, and background, then you're going to want to get good at that and then eventually stop doing it because you'll realize that the story matters more and that the rock that you deliberately put in the foreground of your frame does absolutely nothing to help tell the story. And if you're doing that, maybe you'll learn how to do focus stacking in Photoshop and then quickly realize that it's more trouble than it's worth, and having everything in focus really means that nothing is in focus anyway. All of this in jest, I'm joking, and I know I ruffled some feathers here, but all of this to say that there are a lot of rules in landscape photography, but by and large, most of them, not all of them, but most of them are not actually improvements to an image per se, at least not on their own. But instead, they are more like side quests to the main approach of an image. They're optional. And if you don't do them, that does not mean that your image is bad. You know, a lot of beginner landscape photographers can really get lost in some of these concepts and start to think that, you know, if an image doesn't have X, Y, and Z technique in it, it's far worse than one that does. You know, I see this a lot with the depth thing, the foreground, middle ground, and background thing, and it's just not true. As with all visual communication, again, the visual patterns that you choose to use are the drivers of that communication. The specific techniques in landscape photography might help you clarify the patterns that you're trying to use, but also they might not. That means that they're worth learning so that you understand them, but they're only worth using if the situation calls for it, and that requires you to know the situation. What you want is a suite of tools that you can start to use when you build a house, rather than having a hammer and a nail for everything. This is the same for techniques that you acquire in landscape photography. You know, keep your mind open and build skills to add to your toolkit rather than thinking that the tool itself is the way forward. Okay, if you're enjoying this video, I would really appreciate if you would hit that like button for me so that I know it's good enough to make even more free videos just like this in the future. All right, the last concept is about movement. You know, I've been there and done the whole carry a huge tripod to a spot, plump it down, camp there for a couple of hours, and then watch the sun come up and snap, pack it up, and then go home. I've done this more times than I can count, honestly, and I've most certainly gotten some great images from it. But the really big unlock for me, and I alluded to this earlier in the video, was really letting go of so much gear. You know, letting go of the gear and trading it for mobility instead. I think this is one of the biggest ideas that led me to grow my skill overall as a photographer, not just a landscape photographer, as a photographer fast. You know, rather than staying planted at a single spot for a few hours during the most precious time of day, whenever I'm at a landscape location, I'm moving around, man. I'm getting my steps in. I'm trying out new angles. I'm going where other photographers aren't. I'm shooting wides. I'm shooting details of things that people are like, what the hell is this guy even shooting? And I'm just expanding my range of images from a location and maximizing my time there. While others might walk away with one very, very solid image of the exact thing that they came to shoot, most of the time, I'm looking to walk away with not only that one shot, but an entire carousel of great images to show a story in a sequence, or maybe even enough images to show off a few sequences. You know, where a typical landscape photographer might take 20, 30, 40, 50 photos in a morning, I'm taking 200, 300, 400, 500 different images with different compositions all in a single morning. Sure, 99% of them are absolute trash, but I'm walking away with dozens of usable images from a single morning. Doing this not only increases the yield that you can get from your time at a location, but it also increases the experience that you have, and it starts to refine your style and refine your taste. Over time, because I've experimented so much, I can look at a location wherever I am in the world, and I know I'm going to want this from this location, and then I'm going to want this, and then this, and I'm going to go here, and then this light looks great, so I'm going to do X, Y, and Z and shoot it like this, and so on and so forth. And then your shoots become so much more efficient because the template of the types of shots that you gravitate towards lead you down a path of experimentation within that shot type. And this is only really possible with movement and zoom lenses if you have them as well. But move around a lot next time that you're at a landscape location and experiment with different kinds of ways to showcase and document your scene. Try different things, wides, details, different visual patterns. Don't be afraid to fail, but move. Yes, do the tripod shot, but do it quickly and then pack it down and then walk around. Rapid experimentation through movement will give you the biggest bang for your buck when you're at a location. Alrighty, back to you. Does this help at all? Let me know in the comments which of these concepts sound useful to you, or if you've done any of these before, feel free to share them and your experience with your other fellow beginner photographers. Alrighty, I hope you enjoyed that video. And again, if you want to fast track your photography learning, then check out my photography fundamentals course over at patgay.com/accelerate. All right, I'll see you in the next video. But until then, get out there and make something that matters. Peace.